Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
All right, let's dive in. We're going deep today, folks.
Good.
Into the world of Canadian counterculture back in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, the 60s and 70s.
You know, you sent in this incredible podcast episode from Mr. Hutchings History.
Yeah.
And it looks like we're going to uncover, well, how global events kind of mixed with Canada's own unique, context and created something pretty fascinating, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. It's interesting how Canada's counterculture kind of echoed those global trends, like the civil rights movement or the student protests in the U.S.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was also wrestling with its own homegrown tensions. Especially Quebec, it wasn't just like a simple copy-paste of what was happening elsewhere.
No, not at all. So the episode actually highlights this point that Canada's post-World War II baby boom generation, they had this increased access to higher education, and they played a major role.
Really?
So do you think it was maybe a case of this newly empowered generation?
Oh, for sure.
That was kind of questioning the very fabric of society as they knew it?
Precisely. And their frustration, right, with what they perceived as unresponsive institutions.
Oh, yeah, I see.
Really mirrored a wider disillusionment that was being felt globally, right? It wasn't just about tweaking policies or anything.
No.
It was a deeper yearning. For systemic change.
Wow. Yeah, okay, and then we've got the Vietnam War, this conflict that Canada wasn't directly involved in.
Right.
But the episode really emphasizes its massive impact,
Yeah, the Vietnam War really became this global flashpoint.
Yeah.
It kind of symbolized everything that a lot of young people opposed.
Right.
A good example of how some Canadians viewed American foreign policy at the time is, Al Purdy's The New Romans.
Yeah, great point. And it's also fascinating how Canadians were actively aiding those American draft dodgers. Yeah.
They were even creating and smuggling this manual, to help them find refuge north of the border.
It's incredible.
It really speaks to a sense of solidarity that kind of transcended national boundaries.
For sure.
Right. And so do you think all of these draft dodgers joining Canadian universities and communes, do you think that further fueled
Absolutely,
the counterculture movement?
They brought with them all those experiences and perspectives.
Oh, I see.
That really energized the movement even more.
Yeah.
It created this, this truly transnational exchange of ideas and actions.
Now, Quebec's experience during this era, it was particularly unique.
Totally.
The episode talks about how counterculture there was deeply intertwined with the quest for, Quebec sovereignty.
Yeah, it's crucial to see this within the context of those global anti-imperialist movements.
Okay.
Similar to Algeria's fight for independence from France.
Right. The desire for self-determination was just like this potent force, right?
Absolutely. And the U.S. Black Power movement, too.
Oh, yeah.
That had a significant influence leading to, a more radicalized element within Quebec's youth.
True.
Okay, so we've got these external influences mixing with internal tensions.
Absolutely.
And then the episode mentions the FLQ and their campaign of bombings.
Right.
Culminating in, the dramatic October crisis of 1970.
Yeah, it's a complex period marked by, tragedy with the kidnapping and the death of, Pierre Laporte.
Sure.
And then, Prime Minister Trudeau invoking the War Measures Act. It's a controversial decision to suspend civil liberties, right? It further highlights that tension between individual freedom and maintaining order.
It's almost like a microcosm, wouldn't you say, of that broader struggle kind of playing out globally?
Absolutely.
Like individual expression versus societal stability.
It's a classic tension.
Totally. But the episode also emphasizes the personal aspects of counterculture.
Right.
Kind of beyond that political sphere.
Yeah, it wasn't just about protest and activism.
Right.
It was also about searching for alternative ways of living.
I see. So the rise of hippie culture.
Exactly.
The rejection of materialism. The formation of communes, especially in BC and Ontario.
Yeah, it all signifies this yearning for individual liberation and self-discovery.
So these expressions like embracing nature, experimenting with psychedelics, or even exploring Eastern spirituality, were they also a reaction against
I'd say so.
the perceived, I don't know, rigidity and conformity of the time?
It was a push against those prevailing social norms and search for something more authentic, more personally fulfilling.
I like that. And this desire for self-expression, I mean, it extended into the artistic realm as well.
Totally.
Right? Think about like the music of the Guess Who or the poetry and songs of Leonard Cohen.
For sure.
They captured that rebellious spirit and that individualism that really defined the era.
Totally.
It's fascinating how music, especially like in the spirit of Woodstock, became this unifying force for the youth, transcending geographical boundaries.
Absolutely.
But did it truly translate into lasting social change? That's what I'm really curious about.
Yeah, that's a question that historians are still grappling with, you know? Did Canada's counterculture really revolutionize society?
Yeah.
Did it achieve its goals? To really delve into that, we need to look at the movement through various lenses, you know?
Okay, so it sounds like we're about to unpack some serious historical analysis.
We are. And I think you'll find that the legacy of Canada's counterculture is far more nuanced and complex than it might appear on the surface.
Interesting. So you mentioned to understand the legacy of Canada's counterculture, we need to look at it through different lenses. What are some of the perspectives that historians use to kind of make sense of this period?
Well, the Mr. Hutchings History episode, it highlighted 4 main approaches. You've got cultural history, social history, political history, and postcolonial theory.
Gotcha.
And each one offers kind of a unique way of interpreting the complexities of this era.
Okay, cool. So let's start with cultural history.
Sure.
How does that approach kind of frame Canada's counterculture?
Well, cultural historians tend to focus on those shifts in values, beliefs, artistic expressions. They might, explore the influence of American pop culture, the rise of folk and psychedelic rock, or even, the exploration of alternative spiritualities. Essentially, they're examining how the counterculture kind of reshaped Canadian identity.
So would they argue that this period kind of represented a significant break from traditional Canadian norms, leading to, I don't know, a more open...
Yeah, I think a lot of them would. They'd point to how the counterculture kind of challenged that conformity and conservatism of the previous decades.
Right.
And really kind of paved the way for greater acceptance of diverse lifestyles and a stronger emphasis on individual expression.
Gotcha. And what about the social history perspective? What aspects of the counterculture do they focus on?
Well, social historians, they're interested in the everyday lives of people, right? And how those societal structures shape their experiences. So they would likely kind of dig into...
Like, who were these individuals who were challenging the status quo? What were their social and economic backgrounds?
For sure. They'd be looking at factors like the role of the baby boomers, the growing middle class, and that increased access to higher education. How did those elements contribute to the rise of a generation that felt empowered to demand change?
Okay, now political history likely takes a more political approach, obviously.
Right, exactly.
How would they analyze the counterculture's interaction with, I don't know, the Canadian government or political systems?
Well, political historians would examine, those events like the Vietnam War protests, the rise of Quebec separatism, the October crisis. And they'd analyze how these events shaped, political discourse and policy decisions. They'd ask, did the counterculture really influence the evolution of Canadian politics? Did it lead to any concrete changes in the way that the country was governed?
And some might argue that despite the social and cultural upheaval, there weren't any radical policy changes that immediately followed. So would political historians maybe view this as a sign of the counterculture's kind of limited impact?
Not necessarily, no. While a complete, political revolution didn't occur, they might point to a more subtle long-term influence, right?
Gotcha.
The counterculture really helps shift those societal values, which then, in turn impacted those policy decisions down the line.
Right. So it's like a gradual, significant ripple effect.
Yeah, a ripple effect.
Okay. And lastly, we have postcolonial theory.
Right.
How does that lens kind of apply to understanding Canada's counterculture?
Well, post-colonial theorists, they examine the legacies of colonialism and imperialism.
Right.
They focus on how they continue to kind of shape
Yeah.
power dynamics and social structures.
Okay.
So in this context, they might highlight Quebec's experience, right? Was the push for sovereignty in part a reaction against like a perceived cultural and economic dominance by Anglo-Canadian elites.
So they'd view Quebec separatism as part of a broader global struggle against like colonial legacies.
Yeah, it adds another layer of complexity to the narrative.
Interesting. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And they might also examine how Indigenous communities who are often marginalized in those mainstream historical narratives, how they were impacted by and participated in the counterculture movement.
Totally. It really enriches our understanding.
It's incredible how examining the same period through these various lenses
reveals, such diverse perspectives and insights.
Right.
It moves us beyond just a simplistic understanding of the counterculture as this like monolithic movement, right?
Yeah. History is about analysis and interpretation, not just memorizing facts.
Totally.
Speaking of which, the podcast episode also highlighted some fascinating primary sources.
Oh, cool.
That offer a more intimate glimpse into this era.
Oh, I'm always fascinated by primary sources. They bring history to life in a way that secondary accounts sometimes can't. So what did they mention?
Well, they discussed the FLQ Manifesto, which is a key document for understanding the motivations and ideology behind the Quebec separatist movement. It offers this, this direct window into their vision for an independent socialist Quebec. And earlier we talked about that manual that Canadians created for American draft dodgers.
Yeah.
It's a powerful testament to the transnational nature of the movement and the solidarity felt by so many young people across borders.
Yeah. Those artifacts.
Yeah.
They offer tangible evidence of the connections and shared values that fueled the counterculture movement.
Totally. And on a more personal level, they highlighted Leonard Cohen's poetry and music.
Oh, yeah.
Cohen's work. I mean, it definitely captures that introspection and existential questioning that characterized much of the era.
Right.
But his themes of love, loss, the search for meaning, I mean, they seem to resonate with audiences across generations.
That speaks to the power of art to transcend its time, right?
Totally.
Certain human experiences and emotions, they just they remain relevant regardless of the historical context.
So we've explored the historical context. We've analyzed, different interpretations. We've even examined primary sources.
Right.
It feels like we've gained a much deeper understanding of
I don't think so.
The complexities of Canada's counterculture movement.
I'd agree.
But we still need to tackle that crucial question.
Right.
What was the lasting legacy?
Yeah, the lasting legacy
of this period. Did it result in any lasting changes in Canadian society? I mean, that's the question that's been at the forefront of my mind this whole time.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where we're headed next.
Okay.
We'll delve into those long-term impacts of the counterculture.
Gotcha.
And explore both its triumphs and its shortcomings.
Okay, so we've established that, Canada's counterculture, it was complex, it was multifaceted and undeniably influential.
For sure.
But what about its lasting impact?
Right.
Did it really revolutionize Canadian society?
Yeah, well, the podcast episode, it mentions historian J.M. Bumstead.
Okay.
Who argued that a full-blown revolution never quite materialized.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that the era was a failure.
Yeah.
It's more nuanced than that.
Okay, right. Yeah, change rarely happens overnight.
Yeah.
I'm sensing that while a radical immediate upheaval didn't really occur. There were still significant long-term shifts.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the lasting legacies that you see from this period?
Well, one of the most profound legacies, I think, is this heightened emphasis on individual freedom and self-expression.
Okay.
The counterculture really challenged those traditional norms and hierarchies.
Right.
And it kind of paved the way for a more tolerant and inclusive society.
That resonates with what we see today, doesn't it?
I think so.
I mean, greater acceptance of diverse lifestyles, of the focus on individual rights and freedoms.
Right. Yeah.
These feel like core values that were, championed by the counterculture that have over time become...
For sure, they've become more mainstream.
Yeah, totally. And it goes beyond just individual liberties, right?
Yeah. The counterculture era also, attributed to some significant advances in social justice.
Okay, so think about I don't know.
Think about the environmental movement.
Yeah.
The push for gender equality, the fight for LGBTQ plus rights.
Right.
I mean, all of these have roots in the activism and the ideals of the 60s and 70s.
It's like that era planted seeds that kind of continued to grow and blossom in the decades that followed.
Yeah, it's true, but
wasn't there also some pushback?
Oh, yeah.
Against some of these changes? Right. I mean, society doesn't always readily embrace new ideas, right?
Yeah, there were counter movements and resistance to those changes brought about by the counterculture. Social change. Yeah. It's rarely a linear process.
No, it's not.
It's often met with opposition and setbacks.
Right.
But despite those challenges, I think a lot of the values and the ideas that were championed by the counterculture, they've become deeply ingrained in Canadian society.
Totally. Another lasting legacy that the episode mentions is kind of a more critical and questioning attitude towards authority.
For sure.
It seems like Canadians are less likely to just simply accept what they're told by those in power.
Yeah, the counterculture generation, they were inherently skeptical of the establishment. Right. They demanded transparency and accountability from their leaders.
Right. And that skepticism, that willingness to question the status quo, I mean, it's become a vital part of Canadian political culture.
It's like that era instilled a sense of civic engagement.
Absolutely.
Right. Encouraging people to think critically and demand better from their institution.
Exactly. Yeah. And that critical thinking, it's essential for a healthy democracy, right? It keeps those citizens informed, engaged, and it empowers them to hold their leaders accountable.
So while Canada might not have experienced a dramatic revolution back in the 60s and 70s, the counterculture's impact on the nation's, social, cultural, and political landscape is undeniable.
It's undeniable.
It really is.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive.
It has been. It has been.
We've journeyed through a pivotal period in Canadian history. We've explored its complexities and unearthed its lasting legacies, and it leaves us with much to reflect on.
It does.
It really makes me wonder how we can kind of channel that spirit of questioning activism and community building to address the challenges that we face today. How can we learn from the past to create a better future? What lessons can we take from both the triumphs and the shortcomings of the counterculture era?
I think those are questions worth pondering.
Yeah, for sure.
It's an ongoing conversation, really. Each generation faces its own unique set of challenges, and it's up to us to draw inspiration and wisdom from those who came before us, while forging our own paths.
Totally. Well, a huge thank you.
Oh, of course.
For guiding us through this fascinating exploration.
It was my pleasure.
And to all of you listening, we hope this deep dive has kind of sparked your curiosity and inspired you to continue exploring this remarkable period in Canadian history.
Keep learning.
Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep striving for a better world.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.